So a little while ago, someone told me that some of my sermons are a little predictable, that they kind of know where things are going to go. And that is entirely fair. One of the things that I learned in seminary is that every preacher has basically 3 sermons. We dress them up differently. We bring them out, and sometimes they're disguised as a princess or a cheerleader or a unicorn or a monkey. And we show them to you and go, here is this thing I made. Doesn't it look totally different from all the other ones? Aren't I wildly creative? But really, it's just one of those 3 sermons kind of dressed up. So, I'm going to do you a favor this morning. I'm going to give you the outline to one of those 3 sermons. And that means that you will be able to pay slightly less attention a whole third of the time. But I'm not going to tell you which third of the time, and hopefully you won't be able to see through the disguise that I put it in when I bring it out. But it'll be nice. You'll kind of see where stuff goes. So here's the outline of that sermon. It starts with the way that I started this sermon series. God is love. And there are no footnotes to that. There's no fine print to that. If you do not know love, you do not know God. If you know love, you know God. If you are loved, which you are, and if you love others, which you do, if you wrap yourself up in love like a burrito, if you abide in love, you abide in God, and God abides in you. That's why we've been throughout this sermon series talking about love. Because if we know love, if we understand love, if we have the slightest inkling of love, then we get God. The other part of the sermon is God wins. In the end, when all is said and done, God comes out on top. The world will be what God is calling it to be. We will be who God is calling us to be. And so you can put these together. God wins. God is love. No footnotes, no fine prints. Therefore, by what I believe is the transitive property, love wins. Let me say that again so that you've got it, so you can pay slightly less attention a whole third of the time. God wins. God is love. No footnotes, no fine prints. Therefore, love wins. I am willing to stand by that idea being the core of the gospel. Being close to the center, if not the center, of the good news of Jesus Christ. Love wins. I am so confident about the absolute orthodoxy of that idea that I think Paul, even Paul, agrees with me on that. Here's where some of you will catch on that I occasionally preach the same sermon, even if it's disguised as something else, because I have said this to you before. I will read the sentence. This sentence has 2 clauses. It's got a bit and then a comma and then another bit. I'm going to read them in the reverse order so that you see how it happens. Just as judgment fell on everyone through the failure of one person. This is Paul telling his story. There once was this man named Adam who messed up, and sin entered the world. There came a distance between the world as God wants it to be and the world as it is. Death came into the world. Life was made a little bit less. Just as judgment fell on everyone through the failure of one person, so now the righteous requirements necessary for life are met for everyone through the righteous act of one person. Through Christ, that judgment that fell on everyone is undone, and life comes to everyone. Paul does not say life comes to a few. Paul does not say life comes to some. Paul does not say life comes to many. Paul does not say that life comes to most. Paul does not say that life comes to almost everyone, but not those people. Paul says life comes to everyone. That is roughly a third of my sermons right there. But I want to tell you this, because this is important. You are probably used to hearing that. You are probably used to hearing me, or someone like me, some person who is clergy in the United Church of Christ, say, God wins, God is love, no footnotes, no fine print, therefore love wins for everyone. I cannot tell you how many people have not heard that. I know I've mentioned other churches a couple times in this sermon series, and I cannot tell you how many churches do not preach that. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, in fact. It was about the great de-churching of America. The United States is going through one of the greatest religious shifts in the history of the nation, where people who used to go to church don't so much go to church anymore. For most of those people, that's kind of a casual thing. You know how it is, right? The kids have stuff on Sundays, so you go to that. Or you're on sabbatical, so you just kind of sleep in. Or you move and you don't find a new church. Or there's a global pandemic, and you just kind of never get around to going back. Most people leave the church casually, and most people aren't angry or upset with anyone, and most people are open to the idea of being invited back. But this guest on this podcast had done all of this research on kids who had left the church. And she quoted a 13-year-old girl who is deeply involved with the church, whose dad is a youth pastor, who has heard the gospel told to her again and again and again, and she said, "Why would I tell people I'm Christian? Christians are jerks." And I know that that can be true. Part of that is because I know that I am a jerk sometimes. Part of that is because I've been around other Christians who have been jerks in my direction. There is another version of the gospel that gets preached. God wins. God is love, with oodles of footnotes and pages of fine print. Therefore, by, I think, the transitive property, footnotes and fine print win. I am going to tell you, footnotes and fine print cannot win. Footnotes and fine print cannot liberate us from the powers of sin and death, from everything that makes life less. Footnotes and fine print cannot welcome us into a reign of love. Footnotes and fine print do not create a new heaven and a new earth. No. Footnotes and fine print are what keep us in bondage to the powers of sin and death. They are what makes life a little bit less. Footnotes and fine print are what exclude, what force people out, what say you can't come in here. Footnotes and fine print destroy what is and replace it with nothing. The gospel cannot be about footnotes and fine print, because that gospel is not good news. It's not news to start with. We're used to footnotes and fine print. I have clicked, I agree to stuff I have not read. And it is not good. It doesn't offer us the things that we have been longing for since the beginning. It does not offer us freedom. It does not offer us welcome. It does not offer us abundance or generosity. It does not offer us newness. It does not offer us life. God wins. God is love. No footnotes, no fine print. Love wins. Love frees us. Love welcomes us. Love creates. Love sees each and every one of us as a work of art, as the precious child of a loving God, as a bearer of the image of God, and brings us home. And that is a gospel worth sharing. That is good news. That is exactly what we are not used to. We're so not used to it that when I have said it in other contexts, somebody has told me that is cheap grace. That is the easy way. Where's the discipleship and the struggle and the transformation? And all I can say is that grace is cheap. It's free. That's the point. If it's not free, it's not grace. So yeah, love wins. But there is a twist. There is a bit where it becomes a little bit difficult, because I'm going to push that further. God has already won. God has always been, is now, and will always be love with no footnotes and no fine print. Therefore, love has already won. And the question for us, the question that is always right there in front of us, is if we know that love has won, if we know that we have been freed from the powers of sin and death and everything that makes life less, if we know that we have been welcomed into God's reign of love, if we know that God has already created that reign of love, what are we going to do with that? Are we going to write our own footnotes and fine print? Or are we going to be instruments of grace? And I will tell you, it is hard in a world that loves footnotes and fine print to be an instrument of grace. It is hard to step out of the rules and the regulations and all of the stuff bearing down on us, desperately trying to make life less, and say no. For I am free, and I will free others. I am welcomed, and I will welcome others. I am created anew, and I will build others up. Because God has won. Because God is love. Because love has won. Imagine what the world would be like if that is how we lived.